The Ozarks of 1871 were a land both beautiful and brutal. Rolling ridges blanketed in oak and pine gave way to valleys where mist clung like secrets. Folks who lived there said the hills remembered everything: wars fought, blood spilled, love lost. The land carried whispers, and those whispers often turned into legends. Among the oldest of those hushed tales was the story of the Kincaid family. Mention their name in the wrong company, and conversations went still. Old men spat tobacco into the dirt, women crossed themselves, and children were hurried away before curious ears could ask questions. It wasn't just a story of death. It was a story of silence, a silence so heavy it lasted generations. The Kincaid family lived on Iron Ridge, a jagged stretch of land that overlooked a valley carved by years of river flood. Their cabin was modest, built by calloused hands from timber they cut themselves. The family was led by two brothers, Ezekiel and Thomas Kincaid. Ezekiel, the elder by 5 years, had the stern eyes of a man who carried burdens too early in life. His father had died in the war, and Ezekiel had stepped into the role of protector. He worked the land from dawn until his knuckles bled, his mind always sharp, calculating. Folks called him Zeke the Stone because nothing seemed to break him. Thomas was different. He had laughter in his eyes and a fiddle always within reach. His hands, though rough from farm work, moved like magic across strings, coaxing music that made even the most weary farmer tap a foot. If Ezekiel was the shield, Thomas was the soul. The Kincaids weren't rich, but their home was filled with something far more valuable than gold: hope. Their mother, Martha Kincaid, was a widow whose strength rivaled the hills themselves. She stitched clothes from old flour sacks, baked cornbread that could make a man forget his troubles, and prayed each night for the safety of her children. Then there was Clara, the youngest, barely 13, bright-eyed, curious. She swore she could hear the wind speak through the hollows. "The hills are alive," she'd tell her brothers, "and they talk if you listen." Her innocence was a light in a world still shadowed by war. Neighbors often said the Kincaid place was different. There was warmth in their laughter, a rare kindness in their ways. But sometimes warmth draws the coldest of predators. The scars of the Civil War lingered long after the final gunshot. In the Ozarks, loyalties had been split between Union and Confederate. Families who once shared supper tables now eyed one another with suspicion. The Kincaids tried to stay neutral. Ezekiel rarely spoke of politics. Thomas only spoke of music. But neutrality in a land divided was a dangerous position. Some saw it as weakness. Others saw it as an opportunity. Stray bushwhackers, remnants of guerrilla bands, still roamed the hills, preying on families too weak to fight back. And with the economy in ruins, rumors of hidden caches of Confederate gold began spreading. Desperation can make a man believe anything, especially when envy blinds him. That autumn, a man arrived in the nearest town of Mill Creek. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar slashed across his jaw that never let him smile properly. His name was Jonas Reddick. Jonas was a drifter, the kind who carried stories in one hand and trouble in the other. He leaned against the bar in the tavern, nursing whiskey, spinning tales of families hiding fortunes. "They say some of them rebel boys buried gold in these hills," Jonas muttered to the locals. "Families are guarding it, pretending they're poor as dirt." His words dripped like poison into thirsty ears. Before long, the whispers turned toward the Kincaids. "They keep to themselves," someone said. "And that Ezekiel, he's got the look of a man hiding something." Jonas listened, smirked, and lit a cigarette. The trap was already baited. Rumors are like wildfire in dry brush. They spread fast and destroy everything in their path. Soon, talk of the Kincaids hiding Confederate gold reached every corner of Mill Creek. It didn't matter that their farm barely produced enough corn to feed themselves. It didn't matter that Ezekiel's boots had more holes than leather. The story was easier to believe than the truth. "Those Kincaids, Jonas told his two rough companions one night. They're sitting on something. Ain't nobody that poor unless they're hiding what they don't want found. From that moment on, the Kincaids weren't just neighbors. They were prey. It was a chilly October evening when Jonas and his two men rode up to the Kincaid homestead. The dogs barked first, low and uneasy, as if they sensed the malice in the air. Ezekiel stepped outside, rifle resting in his hands. His jaw tightened when he saw the men. "What brings you here?" he asked. Jonas dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Just passing through. Heard you folks might have something of interest." "We've nothing but cornmeal and sore backs," Ezekiel replied sharply. Jonas's scar twisted with a mock smile. "Then you won't mind if we take a look?" Thomas appeared in the doorway, his fiddle bow clenched like a blade. Clara peeked from behind her mother's skirts, wide-eyed. Ezekiel's voice hardened. "This is our land. You'll ride on now." The men lingered, studying the family, before turning back to their horses. But Jonas's parting words lingered like smoke. "Don't get too comfortable, Kincaid. Secrets don't stay buried long." That night, the Kincaid cabin was restless. Martha sat by the fire, her knitting untouched in her lap. She looked at her eldest son with weary eyes. "Zeke," she whispered, "these men won't stop. You know that, don't you?" Ezekiel stared into the flames. "If we run, they'll chase us. If we stay, we fight. This is our home, Mama. Pa built it with his own hands. I won't let them take it." Thomas, sitting nearby, plucked his fiddle strings absent-mindedly. "Maybe we could reason with them. Show them we've got nothing worth stealing." Martha shook her head. "You can't reason with greed, Thomas. Men like that see what they want, not what's real." Clara leaned closer to her mother. "The hills told me," she whispered. "They told me something bad is coming." Her words sent a chill through the room. Ezekiel gripped his rifle tighter. It was near midnight when it began. The first sign was the dogs, howling in frenzy. Then came the flicker of orange through the cracks of the cabin's shutters. "The barn!" Ezekiel shouted, rushing to the door. Flames engulfed the structure, smoke curling into the cold night sky. The livestock screamed in terror as fire consumed them. Gunshots followed, sharp and merciless. Bullets struck the cabin walls, splintering wood. Thomas grabbed Clara and pulled her to the floor. Martha clutched her rosary, whispering prayers through trembling lips. Ezekiel fired back through a window, his jaw set in stone. "Stay low," he barked. Jonas's voice rang outside, cruel and commanding. "Give us the gold, Kincaid, and we'll let the rest of you live." But there was no gold to give, only blood to spill. The night turned into a battlefield. Ezekiel fought like a man possessed, reloading and firing with deadly precision. One of Jonas's men fell screaming into the dirt, but more shadows advanced through the smoke. Thomas, trembling but determined, tried to shield Clara with his own body. "Stay behind me, sis," he whispered. But fate is cruel. A bullet tore through the cabin wall and struck him in the chest. His fiddle bow slipped from his hand as he collapsed, gasping. "No!" Clara screamed, clutching her brother. Martha ran to her son, tears streaming. "Not my boy? Lord, not my boy?" Ezekiel roared with fury and fired again, his shots echoing through the holler. But the attackers pushed harder, breaking down the door. Jonas stepped inside, his eyes glinting with hunger. "Where's the gold?" he demanded, his gun leveled. And in that moment, as smoke and blood filled the air, it became clear. The Kincaid family was not fighting for riches. They were fighting for love, for home, for one another. The cabin burned with choking smoke, the air thick with screams and gunpowder. Jonas stood inside, his gun raised, demanding treasure that did not exist. And then, from the corner of the room, a small voice cut through the chaos. Clara, trembling but unbroken, stepped forward, her cheeks streaked with soot and tears. She lifted her chin and spoke. "We don't have gold. We don't have silver. All we have is each other, and you've already taken that." The men froze for a heartbeat. Even killers can falter when faced with a child's truth. Thomas lay gasping behind her, blood soaking his shirt. Martha clung to him, rocking, whispering prayers. Ezekiel stood bleeding from a cut across his brow, his rifle empty. Jonas sneered, though for a brief instant, his scarred face wavered. "You'll say anything to keep it hid?" he muttered. But Clara's voice lingered, sharp and haunting, like a bell tolling in the night. By dawn, the world was quiet again, too quiet. The neighbors who came at sunrise found only smoke rising from blackened timber. The Kincaid barn was a pile of ashes, the cabin's walls half collapsed. Inside lay the bodies of Martha, Ezekiel, and Thomas, lifeless. But Clara was gone. Some swore they saw small footprints leading into the woods, as though she had fled into the hills. Others whispered that Jonas had taken her. But no body was ever found, and no grave ever dug for the youngest Kincaid. The town buried the rest quietly, without ceremony. Fear kept lips sealed. No one dared ask questions too loudly. Jonas and his men were gone, vanished into the hills like smoke on the wind. And just like that, the massacre was swallowed by silence. The story of Clara Kincaid became legend. Some claimed she survived, hidden by strangers who pitied her. They swore they saw a girl with bright eyes working in farms far away, never revealing her name. Others told darker tales. They said Clara became one with the hills themselves, that on misty nights her laughter could be heard echoing through the hollows, or that her fiddle played in the distance when danger lurked. Clara didn't die, the children whispered around fires. She's still here, watching. No matter the tale, one truth remained. Clara's fate was never written down. She was the ghost that history could not decide whether to bury or believe. The people of Mill Creek carried the weight of what had happened. They knew who was responsible. They knew Jonas Reddick's face, his scar, his lies. But no lawman ever came knocking. No posse ever rode out. Why? Because fear is a prison stronger than iron. To speak out meant drawing the same fire upon themselves. To accuse meant risking their own barns, their own families. So they chose silence. And silence, in the end, killed the Kincaids a second time. Years passed. The ashes of the Kincaid homestead were reclaimed by vines and moss. The graves grew unmarked, forgotten, yet the hills remembered. Hunters spoke of hearing faint music, Thomas's old fiddle tune, drifting across the ridges on cold nights. Travelers swore that a girl's laughter followed them in the woods, vanishing before they could see her. The melody became a warning. "If you hear the fiddle," the elders said, "it means the hills are restless. Be kind, or be cursed." Thus the Kincaids lived on, not in books or ledgers, but in whispers and fear. The story of the Kincaids was more than tragedy. It was a parable carved into the conscience of the Ozarks. It warned of greed, how men will destroy families chasing riches that don't exist. It warned of silence, how neighbors who look away are just as guilty as the killers. It warned of love, how even in their darkest hour, the Kincaids' greatest treasure was not gold, but each other. Those who remembered told their children, "Protect your home, but never let greed blind you, and never ever stay silent in the face of wrong." Decades later, in 1932, a young historian named Ellen Moore was sifting through forgotten courthouse records when she found a curious thing, a half-burned, leather-bound journal. The handwriting inside was small, careful, and unmistakably young. It was Clara Kincaid's diary. Her words painted the life of her family, their laughter, their fears, their struggles. And on the final page, in shaky handwriting, she had written, "If I live, I'll tell the world what happened. If I die, let these words be my family's voice." Ellen's hands trembled as she turned the fragile pages. She knew then that the massacre had not been a legend. It had been real. Ellen tried to publish Clara's story. She wrote articles, gave lectures, but many dismissed her. It's just folklore, they said. Mountain ghost stories. Still, she never stopped telling it. Her children grew up on Clara's words, knowing them as truth, even when others laughed. You don't need a gravestone to prove a life, Ellen said. You need a story that refuses to die. And so, though the massacre was erased from official ledgers, it survived in whispers passed from one heart to another. In 1978, long after Ellen herself had passed, her grandson visited Iron Ridge out of curiosity. The ruins of the Kincaid cabin were nearly gone, just a few stones left of the chimney. But when he dug through the rubble, he found something astonishing. An old fiddle, charred but intact, buried beneath the collapsed chimney stones. Inside, carved into the wood, was a name: Clara. It wasn't just a ghost's song after all. Clara had lived long enough to hide her brother's fiddle, leaving behind her truth. Whether she perished soon after or escaped the hills forever, no one knows. But the instrument was proof. The Kincaids had been real, and Clara's spirit had endured. Today, the massacre of the Kincaid family is still absent from history books. But legends breathe where ink cannot. The story remains as sharp as ever. That greed is a fire that consumes not only barns but souls. That silence can be as deadly as bullets. That love, even crushed under violence, echoes beyond generations. The Kincaid brothers died defending their home. Martha died protecting her children. Clara vanished, but her voice lived on, through diary, through fiddle, through the whispers of the hills. The massacre may have been erased from history, but it was not erased from memory. And the lesson it leaves us is clear: stand for what is right, even if the world demands your silence. Because silence is the true eraser of history. And sometimes the only thing keeping a story alive is the courage of one small, trembling voice.